you're telling me that protest, quote unquote, protest activity we've seen in Los Angeles, we've seen in Minnesota, we've seen in other places that often turns violent, that some of this, maybe much of it, is funded by overseas money, including by this individual who has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can see on on a lot of the placards, when you see all these placards roll out, Party for Socialism and Liberation, other groups like that, the Democratic Socialists of America. These are not organic, spontaneous. They got thousands and thousands of signs that get pointed out. Those are all within the Singham network.
$60 million, at least 14 different groups. That sounds like a pretty broad ecosystem here. Where's this money coming from? I mean, how is it flowing to these groups? Do you have any sense?
So we've built a database that contains hundreds of thousands of rows from grants from networks like the Soros network, the Arabella funding network, as mentioned, the Neville Singham funding network, many others, Tides, the Ford Foundation Network, the Rockefeller Funding Network, these massive NGOs that have billions of dollars to spend on all kinds of coordinated protest, or in this case, riot activity.
Let me just start with you, Senator Cornyn, if I could. I'm sure you're familiar with the recent anti-ICE protests in Minnesota. Let me just ask you this. From your vantage point in the state, are the majority of these protests spontaneous or more organized? What is your impression? You're there.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. They're highly organized and coordinated.
What evidence of that? What data? What signs have you observed that would indicate some level of coordination?
Well, we've seen in Minnesota, we've seen a wide variety of coordinated efforts. The agitation groups on the ground, there are a wide variety of them, some national, some very professional, in addition to local reports that state they've trained some 30,000 observers to get in and get in the middle of the protests.
And how would you describe the tactics that are used during these protests that you've observed? Peaceful, aggressive, inciting violence, trying to draw a reaction? I mean, again, you're on the ground, so you tell us.
Yeah, what we've seen is a whole host of doxing, highly coordinated efforts in doxing. We've seen incidents of violence against federal agents. I think in 2 cases we've had agents that one had their finger bitten off, and they've been pelted with frozen bottles, stones, and every other type of thing, in addition to directly interfering with legal law enforcement.
Let me ask you this. Have you seen any evidence that state officials are cooperating or coordinating with these efforts in any manner?
Yes, we've seen there are a variety of state officials, elected officials that represent the Minneapolis area that have gotten involved. Some are on the chat box, the chats out there. We've got one representative, very proud, Brad Tabke is a representative out there proud, making sure to help train and coordinate those efforts.
Mr. Rimmer, can I just turn to you? Senator Cornyn said that he has seen coordinated efforts within his state to disrupt ICE, including lookout signal chats, et cetera. Your organization specializes in following nonprofit funding and organizational networks. So based on your research, what organizations have been active on the ground in Minnesota? What can you tell us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we have tracked over $60 million, according to the latest 990 disclosures, to approximately 14 groups, some of them national, others on the ground. Groups like the ACLU provide the legal defense, as well as facilitate the trainings for some of the tactics that Senator Cornyn just described. A group named Democracy Forward. Take Action Minnesota has gotten over $10 million from these large NGO networks, including the Neville Singham network, Indivisible, National Lawyers Guild, CTUL, the Council on American Islamic Relations Minnesota, CARE, Minnesota 350, Voices for Racial Justice, on and on. Like I said, over $60 million just according to the latest 990 disclosures.
$60 million, at least 14 different groups. That sounds like a pretty broad ecosystem here. Where's this money coming from? I mean, how is it flowing to these groups? Do you have any sense?
So we've built a database that contains hundreds of thousands of rows from grants from networks like the Soros network, the Arabella funding network, as mentioned, the Neville Singham funding network, many others, Tides, the Ford Foundation Network, the Rockefeller Funding Network, these massive NGOs that have billions of dollars to spend on all kinds of coordinated protest, or in this case, riot activity.
Give us a sense, if you could, of how this money flows to the ground level. You know, how does it get from these various donors and come down to ground level and start funding protests and other violent activity?
It comes in the form of a check, a six-figure check. That'll come from whether it's the Open Society or the Tides groups, the Singham groups. They'll fund directly some of these on-the-ground organizations. And we've seen this happen time and again. It's not just in Minnesota.
So the money, I think we've got a chart perhaps, the money gets moved around. You just referenced a number of these groups, Arabella Advisors, the Tides groups. These are left-wing, dark money groups. So you've got this incredible, I mean, just look at the number of different entities on this one chart, all of this money moving through all of these different groups, many of them, again, non-disclosed donors, right? So we don't know exactly where the donors ultimately come from. Oftentimes the entity that gets the money doesn't have to report where they get the money. So it's washed through multiple times. And what you're saying is your research has found multiple different left-wing groups that are funding these protests on the ground in Minnesota. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And the foreign money is probably the most concerning, whether it's from Neville Roy Singham or the Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss.
Okay, talk about that. Talk about the foreign money, because you've mentioned Singham now a couple of times. There was a New York Post article not long ago talking about Neville Singham, who's based, I think, in China. Tell us what your research has uncovered about this foreign money making its way to American protests that often harm our law enforcement officers.
Sure. So Neville Roy Singham, he's an American citizen. He's an avowed Marxist, and he made nearly $1 billion roughly a decade ago selling his tech company. One of the funds that purchased the tech company had Chinese sovereign wealth money in it. And once he sold that company, again, got close to $1 billion, he now uses that money to fund a variety of protest, riot, anti-Semitic protests, the pro-Hamas things in New York. He funded the LA riots earlier this year. And so he lives in China, is a pro-CCP guy, and he's not done. He's also got very close ties to the communists in Cuba. He finances trips for American groups to go down to Cuba to receive Marxist revolutionary training. They come back here, and then they operate on the ground. Famously, one of the groups in Salt Lake City, the Armed Queers of Salt Lake City, they went down to Cuba and got one of these trips. They're also very anti-ICE and working on these anti-ICE demonstrations.
So let me just make sure I understand. You're telling me that protest, quote unquote, protest activity we've seen in Los Angeles, we've seen in Minnesota, we've seen in other places that often turns violent, that some of this, maybe much of it, is funded by overseas money, including by this individual who has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Have I got that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can see on on a lot of the placards, when you see all these placards roll out, Party for Socialism and Liberation, other groups like that, the Democratic Socialists of America. These are not organic, spontaneous. They got thousands and thousands of signs that get pointed out. Those are all within the Singham network.
Let me just finish with this. You mentioned another major source of foreign money. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Hans-Jörg Wyss, he's a Swiss billionaire. The New York Times reported this. He's one of the largest funders of the Arabella network of funds. He pledged to give $200 million to electing people in the United States. Many people have wondered how is a foreigner allowed to fund political operations. Thus far has escaped, hey, there's been some investigations, but not enough.
This is exactly the kind of thing that Alexander Hamilton all those years ago warned about when he warned about the danger of foreign influence and foreign adversaries in our elections, and we're seeing it play out in real time. Senator Kim, I'll turn it over to you.